The day Valentina Cross was forced to marry a man she had never loved, she stood beneath a chandelier worth more than most people's homes and stared at the stranger waiting for her at the end of the aisle. He was not a billionaire, not a celebrity, and not the powerful businessman her family had promised her. He was a tired single father wearing an old black suit, holding the tiny hand of a little girl who looked at Valentina with innocent eyes. Everyone in the room knew this marriage was a punishment. Nobody knew it would become the greatest blessing of their lives. Before we begin, if you believe that kindness can change a person's heart and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Epic Story Hub for more emotional stories like this. Now, let us begin. Valentina had built an empire from cold decisions and sleepless nights. At 32, she was the youngest chief executive of one of the largest construction companies in the country, a woman whose name could make investors nervous and competitors disappear from a negotiation table. Newspapers called her ruthless. Employees called her frightening. Business rivals called her heartless. Valentina never corrected them. She had learned very young that kindness was dangerous. When she was 16, her mother had died after years of illness, and her father had responded to the tragedy by burying himself in business. Valentina had learned to survive without asking anyone for comfort. She turned pain into ambition, loneliness into discipline, and fear into control. By the time she became CEO, she had convinced herself that needing nobody was the same thing as being strong. Then came the morning everything changed. Valentina's father, Elias Cross, suffered a sudden collapse during a board meeting. Doctors later told her that years of stress had damaged his heart, and that another major shock could be fatal. While sitting beside his hospital bed on a bright summer afternoon, Valentina discovered something that made her blood run cold. Her father's company was drowning in debt because of a failed development project. There was only one way to save it. A wealthy family had agreed to provide the investment needed to keep the company alive, but they demanded a marriage between Valentina and their eldest son. Valentina refused immediately. She said she would rather watch the company burn than surrender her life. But her father had one final condition written into the company's trust. If Valentina refused the marriage, control of the company would pass to the board, and thousands of employees would lose their jobs. For the first time in years, the woman who had defeated billion-dollar competitors found herself powerless. The wedding was arranged within 3 weeks. But there was a problem. The man she was supposed to marry, Adrian Vale, had disappeared days before the ceremony. His family desperately needed the alliance and refused to cancel it. Instead, they presented an unexpected replacement, Adrian's younger half-brother, Elias Mercer, a quiet widower and single father who had never wanted anything to do with the family's fortune. Elias had no interest in Valentina's money. He lived in a modest house on the edge of the city, worked as an architect, and raised his 6-year-old daughter, Mira, alone after losing his wife several years earlier. He had agreed to the marriage only because the contract would provide financial protection for Mira and prevent his daughter from being dragged into a legal battle over the family business. When Valentina first saw Elias, she was furious. He looked nothing like the powerful man she had expected. His suit was simple. His shoes were slightly worn. His hair was untidy, as if he had spent the morning trying to convince a stubborn child to eat breakfast instead of preparing for a wedding. And beside him stood little Mira, clutching a faded stuffed rabbit. Valentina looked at the child and then at Elias. She quietly told him that this marriage would be nothing more than a contract. There would be no expectations, no romance, and no interference in each other's lives. Elias simply nodded. He told her that was exactly what he wanted. Neither of them noticed Mira watching them carefully. Their wedding took place under a brilliant afternoon sky. There were hundreds of guests, expensive flowers, cameras, and enough champagne to fill a swimming pool. Yet Valentina felt completely alone. When she placed the ring on Elias's finger, she felt as if she were signing away the last piece of freedom she possessed. The first week of marriage was painfully quiet. Valentina continued working from sunrise until late evening. Elias stayed in the guest wing with Mira. They passed each other in enormous hallways like strangers living in a luxury hotel. Valentina expected Elias to ask for money, favors, or access to her world. He never did. Instead, she began noticing small things. Every morning, Elias prepared Myra's breakfast himself. He packed her school bag, checked her homework, fixed her hair, and walked her to the car. If Mira woke from a nightmare, Elias sat beside her bed until she fell asleep again. He never complained about exhaustion. He never asked anyone to praise him. One afternoon, Valentina returned home earlier than usual because a business meeting had been cancelled. As she entered the garden, she saw Elias kneeling in the grass, helping Mira build a tiny wooden house for birds. His expensive new watch, a wedding gift from Valentina's family, was lying in the dirt beside him. Mira was laughing so loudly that her voice echoed across the garden. Valentina stopped walking. She could not remember the last time she had heard someone laugh without fear. Mira noticed her standing there and ran toward her. Instead of being frightened by the intimidating billionaire, the little girl simply grabbed her hand and asked if she wanted to help paint the birdhouse. Valentina almost said no. Then she looked into Myra's eyes and quietly sat down beside them. For the first time in years, Valentina spent an entire afternoon doing something that produced no profit. They painted the birdhouse badly. Mira got paint on Valentina's expensive dress. Elias tried not to laugh. Valentina pretended to be angry, but when Mira looked worried, Valentina smiled and told her it was fine. That tiny smile changed something. Days passed, and Valentina slowly began seeing the world differently. She noticed that Elias never ate until Mira had finished her meal. She discovered that he kept his late wife's photograph in a drawer, not because he was trapped in the past, but because he wanted Mira to remember her mother. She learned that Elias had rejected a wealthy inheritance years earlier because he wanted to build his own life rather than live beneath his family's shadow. And then Valentina discovered the truth about her own marriage. The marriage contract had not been created to punish her. Elias had secretly negotiated it so that Valentina could keep control of her company. He had demanded that his family's investment come without giving them authority over her business. He had protected her from the very people she believed were controlling her. When Valentina confronted him, Elias simply told her that he knew what it felt like to have powerful people make decisions about your life. That sentence stayed with her. For the first time, Valentina realized that the man she had considered weak might actually be stronger than everyone in the room. But just as her heart began opening, disaster arrived. A major project owned by Valentina's company collapsed during construction. Several people were injured, and the media immediately blamed her leadership. Investors began selling shares. Board members demanded her resignation. Someone had deliberately changed safety documents before the accident, but nobody knew who. Valentina locked herself inside her office for nearly 2 days. She refused food. She refused sleep. She refused help. Elias eventually found her sitting alone in the dark during a bright afternoon, surrounded by financial reports and photographs from the accident site. He did not lecture her. He simply placed a cup of tea beside her and sat quietly. Valentina finally admitted that she was terrified. She confessed that she had spent her entire life pretending she was incapable of breaking because she believed that if people saw her weakness, they would abandon her. Elias told her that being strong did not mean carrying everything alone. Those words broke through the walls she had spent 16 years building. Valentina cried in front of him. Not the silent tears she had hidden from everyone. Not the tears she had wiped away before entering a boardroom. She cried like the frightened girl she had once been, and Elias stayed beside her without trying to fix her. Meanwhile, Mira discovered something that would help uncover the truth. She remembered seeing a man entering Valentina's office several days before the accident. The man had been carrying a distinctive silver briefcase. Valentina recognized it immediately. It belonged to her chief financial officer, Conrad Bellamy, the man she had trusted for almost a decade. With Elias's help, Valentina investigated quietly. They discovered that Conrad had been stealing money from the company for years. When Valentina's father became ill and the company faced financial problems, Conrad had manipulated the failed project to destroy Valentina's reputation and take control of the company. The evidence was overwhelming. Valentina confronted Conrad during an emergency board meeting. For the first time, she did not stand there as the ruthless billionaire everyone feared. She stood there as a woman who had learned that power without compassion was empty. Conrad was arrested, the company was saved, and the injured workers received full compensation. But Valentina knew the greatest change had nothing to do with money. It happened that evening when she returned home. Mira was sitting on the front steps waiting for her. The moment she saw Valentina, she ran into her arms. Valentina froze. Nobody had ever run toward her like that. Mira hugged her tightly and told her she was happy that Valentina had come home. Home. The word struck Valentina harder than any business loss ever had. For years, she had owned mansions, private jets, luxury cars, and entire buildings, yet she had never truly had a home. Now a little girl was giving her one. Elias stood behind Mira, smiling quietly. Valentina looked at him and realized something terrifying. She no longer wanted the marriage to end. The contract that had once felt like a prison had somehow become the doorway to the life she never knew she wanted. Months later, Valentina surprised everyone by changing the company culture. She created scholarships for employees' children, established emergency funds for workers, and began visiting construction sites personally. She no longer measured success only by profits. She began measuring it by how many lives were made better because her company existed. And every afternoon, she came home before sunset. Mira would wait by the window. Elias would prepare dinner. Sometimes they would sit in the garden beneath the golden evening sky, watching birds gather around the little wooden house they had built together. One afternoon, Valentina finally told Elias that she wanted something. She wanted to rewrite their marriage contract. Not because her father demanded it. Not because their companies needed it. Not because either family expected it. She wanted to stay married because she had fallen in love with him. Elias looked at her for a long moment and reminded her that their original agreement had been to remain strangers. Valentina smiled through tears and said that sometimes life begins by forcing two people together, only to show them that they were exactly where they needed to be. Elias reached for her hand. Mira, who had been secretly listening from the doorway, ran toward them and wrapped both of them in a hug. And under the warm afternoon sunlight, the woman once known as the coldest billionaire in the city finally understood something money had never taught her. Love does not always arrive gently. Sometimes it arrives disguised as an unwanted marriage, a tired single father, and a little girl carrying a broken stuffed rabbit. Sometimes the person we believe is ruining our life is actually the person who saves it. Valentina had spent years building walls around her heart because she was afraid of being hurt again. Elias and Mira never tried to destroy those walls. They simply showed her that she no longer needed them. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Epic Story Hub. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope, love, and kindness to you. And before we reach the final line, comment, kindness, below if you believe that one act of kindness can change someone's entire life. Because sometimes, the greatest love stories do not begin with two people choosing each other. Sometimes, they begin with two broken people being placed in the same room by fate. And sometimes, the heart discovers home in the very place it once believed it had been imprisoned.